They will remember me as a teacher, not what I'm about to become. I've been bitten. Let's get that out of the way. I'm not making it out of here. I don't know how long I have until I'm like them. So, we have to hurry, okay? I start to draw on the whiteboard. This is the school, this is the gym, and here is where the teacher's lounge is. The wound on my leg is bleeding. I know they can see it. I stop to tighten my makeshift bandage. We don't panic, I say slowly to my 7 remaining students, their faces pale and wide-eyed. We plan. They glance at each other nervously. I put on my best face. They need to be confident if this is going to work. If they freeze out there, they'll be ripped apart. I start to hand out thick textbooks to everyone. I take the last and begin to rip out the pages until only the cover remains. I tape the pageless book loosely to the forearm of Sophia, the class leader. Now, if I'm trying to bite or scratch you, I say, slowly demonstrating my point, you have a shield. Use it to escape an attack. I slowly attack Sophia. She blocks my faux strike, and I go to bite her forearm, but the book does its job. Then, while your attacker is busy with your shield, slip out of it and run away. Like a lizard and its tail? Corey says, his scientific mind always making connections. Exactly. Get started with the books and try not to have too much fun with it. I know you've wanted to do this for a while now. The mood lightens a bit. They start on the project, reminiscent of craft time. I'm so astonished by their resiliency. I'm fully aware that my time is finite and every second counts, but I take a moment to bask in my pride. I return to the whiteboard and continue detailing the diagram in ways they would recognize. There's a tug on my shirt. It's the twins, Lena and Micah. I'm sorry, I don't think there's an exit there, Lena finishes softly, pointing at the fire escape I marked beside the east hallway. I blink, leaning closer to the board. What do you mean? Micah steps up beside her, silent as always, and opens the tattered notebook he never lets go of. There's a rough sketch inside our school. You made this? The detail in the sketch is impressive. It was bricked over during the summer remodel. The other side of that wall is a bathroom now. She says calmly. They're right. How could I forget that? I hand the marker to Micah, and the twins go to work on the whiteboard. I check on the others. Sophia has finished hers and is helping make extras for Lena and Micah. She's very observant and filling the need of the moment without being asked. There's a shuffling sound outside the door. Everyone stops what they're doing and watches. The blinds are down, that's typical lockdown protocol, but the slow scraping sound of dragging or limping. A whinny is what we call them. They're the most common in the school. They drag their ribboned flesh down the halls and into classrooms while calling the name. Winnie? Sophia wraps an arm around the smallest girl, Ellie. Corey places a paper-shielded hand gently on her back. Fienie? It starts to bang on the door. Thump, pause. Winnie? Thump, pause. Winnie. I motion to everyone to stay still and quiet. I wish I could call for help, but not even 911 is picking up. All phones do for us now is make noise, which gives me an idea. I go to Antonio and make a gesture to take out his phone. He looks at me, confused. I've written him up for being distracting with it. I know he has it. We don't have time for rules. Take out your phone, I say in a hush. I'm not taking it from you. Thump, pause. Winnie. He relents. My mom said not to tell anyone. She won't get me another, he whispers. I motion for him and everyone else to watch. I take out my phone and write my number on the whiteboard. Dial my number, and when I say so, press call. Antonio gives me a nod of acknowledgement. I motion to the largest boy, Derek, to come over to where I am. I remember his grandma showing me pictures of him playing pee-wee baseball, and since I'm going to be controlling the door in case things get out of hand, I trust him to make the throw that will let us finish preparations. My head is starting to hurt. Derek crouches beside me, eyes flicking to the door, to my leg, to the phone glowing dimly in my palm. "Where do you want it?" he whispers. "Far," I say. "Down by the art wing lockers. You remember how the floor slopes? Let gravity help you. It still needs to function." I hand him the phone. I count down silently from 3, then open the door enough to let Derek do his thing. With a swift underhand motion, the phone goes sliding down the hallway. I slam the door hard. "Now, Antonio," I say, holding the door shut from the now aggressive Winnie pushing from the other side. A moment later, the shrill sound of my ringtone playing echoes in the hall. The door's force ceases. "Winnie?" The sound of a dragging limb moves away, and with the end of the ringing also comes the end of the threat, for now at least. I need to sit down. I'm feeling sore, and my leg feels hot. They watch me move to my chair and slump in it. Looking at them reminds me of a balloon losing air. "What do we do when we're outside?" Sophia asks. "Look after each other. Find somewhere safe. Never stop learning. I don't know what's waiting out there, but I believe in all of you. We could go to my house. I don't have any neighbors. It's kinda far, but there's plenty of room, and my mom's been canning all summer if you like vegetables." Ellie peeps. She usually doesn't speak up in a group like this. She, like all of them, is growing up before my eyes. I wish I could go with them to ensure their safety, but that was never my job. My job has always been to prepare them for the outside world, and I hope I've done that. Everyone look at the whiteboard. Try to memorize the route outside. You can't go the way you usually would. 5 minis, then it's time to go. Things are getting dizzy. They wear their bravest faces. I sit behind my desk and watch them as each gives me a last look. Derek watches over Ellie. Corey holds his shield prepared for defense. Lena and Micah, navigation at the ready. Antonio gathers all the phones from the confiscation box and shoves them in his pockets. And Sophia, confident and strong. "We don't panic, we plan," she says as the last of them enters the hallway. They're ready for anything. When they're gone, I just stare at their seats. I can feel the blood running down my leg and see the pool it's making underneath me. There's a sweater at one of the desks. They need every advantage they can get, I say to myself. With a groan, I get up and grab the sweater. I open the door and wonder if they would still hear me if I called to them. "Winnie?" Story 2. I'm the developer of a ghost hunting app. I'm writing this to explain why I destroyed it, and to beg you not to make the same mistake I did. 3 months ago, I permanently deleted every file associated with a project I called Aura. I wiped the cloud repository, scrubbed the backups from my local drives, and then physically destroyed the hard drives with a drill press in my garage. The noise the drill made, that high-pitched scream as it bit into the magnetic platters, is one of the few sounds that can drown out the ringing in my ears. I am writing this now, under a name that isn't mine, from a city I've never lived in before, because last night I saw an article about a new augmented reality game that's about to launch. The description of its dynamic environmental interaction engine sounded terrifyingly familiar. It made me realize my silence is a luxury I can't afford. My silence could get someone else killed. I live in a small, furnished apartment now. The kind that's designed for transient people. The furniture is bland and impersonal, which is how I like it. There are no pictures on the walls, no sentimental clutter. Everything I own fits into 2 suitcases. I have rituals. I check the 3 deadbolts on my door every hour. I never sit in a chair that has its back to a doorway. I've covered the reflective screen of the television with a thick blanket. I sleep with a salt lamp on, not because I believe it does anything, but because its dim, orange glow means I never have to wake up in complete darkness. The silence of this place is the hardest part. It's a deep, profound quiet that my brain constantly tries to fill. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the plumbing in the walls becomes a question. Is that just the building settling? Or is it something else? Aura was supposed to be my answer to all that. My way out. It was supposed to be a ghost hunting app, but that was just the marketing angle. The concept itself isn't original, I know. The App Store is flooded with them, cheap toys that flash random numbers and play spooky sounds. Mine was just going to be better. More elegant. I wasn't a believer. I was a programmer, and a damn good one. And to a programmer, the universe is a system with rules. I saw the paranormal not as a spiritual phenomenon, but as a predictable glitch in human perception. The eye seeing faces in wood grain, the ear hearing whispers and static. This is called pareidolia, and I believed I could code an engine that would replicate those patterns on demand. The goal was to create the most convincing illusion of the supernatural ever coded. The app would use a phone's camera and microphone, but the data it collected was mostly a smokescreen. The real work was done by my algorithm. It would analyze the visual input for any random noise, pixel artifacts, lens flare, dust motes, and subtly enhance them into faint, smoky shapes that looked vaguely like figures. The audio component did the same, stringing together snippets of white noise to create the impression of voices. It was a fake. A clever one, but a fake. My masterpiece of deception. My best friend, Mark, was my only beta tester. He was my opposite in almost every way. I saw the world as a complex machine to be understood. He saw it as a magical story to be experienced. We've been friends since our freshman year of college, bonded by a shared love for late-night sci-fi movies and cheap pizza. I remember one night we were walking back to our dorm through a misty field on campus, and Mark stopped dead. He pointed at a gnarled old oak tree. "Doesn't it look like it's watching us?" He'd whispered, his voice filled with genuine awe. I'd laughed and pulled out my phone, taking a picture and explaining the precise way the shadows and the fog were creating the illusion of a face in the bark. He just shook his head, smiling. "You see the code, Leo," he said. "I see the ghost in the machine." I think, in a way, I was building aura for him. I was trying to prove my point, to show him the code behind the ghost, but maybe I was also trying to give him the magic he so desperately wanted to see. He was my biggest supporter. He didn't see a cynical cash grab. He saw a genuine tool for discovery. He was the one who pushed me, texting me links to local haunted places and begging me to try the app there. One of his favorites was the old Blackwood Mill on the edge of town, a derelict textile factory that had been rotting since the 50s. The EMF fluctuations there would be off the charts, he'd text. I always patiently explained that the increased background noise in an old, drafty building would just give the algorithm more random data to work with, creating better fakes. It was a feature, not a bug. For the first few weeks of the beta test, it was fun. It was our game. He'd send me screenshots of wispy figures in the corner of his room. "I think I have a ghost in my kitchen," he texted one afternoon, along with a picture showing a vague, smoky smudge hovering near his toaster. "Does it want toast?" I replied. He sent back a laughing emoji. "I think it's a gluten-free ghost. It just seems to be vibing." I felt a swell of pride in my work. My code was working perfectly. It was a perfect trick. The turning point was the mill. He finally went, against my advice. He called me that night, and the usual excitement in his voice was replaced by something else. Something tight and strained. "Leo, I saw something," he said, his voice low. "At the mill." It was different. I settled into my chair, ready to be the voice of reason. Different how? It wasn't like the others, he said. The ones in my apartment are like smoke. They drift. This one, it was solid. It was in one of the collapsed doorways in the main weaving room. It was just a shape, you know? A tall, black shape. But it didn't move. It just stood there. And when I pointed my phone at it, it didn't fade. It stepped back into the shadows. A prickle of unease ran down my spine, but I squashed it. Mark, the lighting in that place must be a nightmare. The sensors were probably getting confused, creating a hard-edged artifact instead of a soft one. And the stepping back thing was probably just the filter reevaluating the light as you moved. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said, his voice small, a raw edge to it. It felt like it was watching me, Leo. It felt wrong. It's one thing for your algorithm to show me smoke, but this felt different, solid. Like it knew I was looking. I spent the next 10 minutes patiently explaining the technical reasons for what he saw. I was so sure of myself, so condescendingly logical. I can still hear the resignation in his voice when he finally gave up. I guess so. Still, I can't shake it. This one felt different. That conversation haunts me now. It was his last chance, his cry for help, and I explained it away with algorithms. A few days later, I pushed the final update to the audio feature. I tweaked it to sound more natural. That night, my phone rang. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because my eyes were burning from staring at lines of code and I was about to finally give up for the night. I almost didn't answer. I wish to God I hadn't. There was no hello, just Mark's shaky breathing and the low, crackling hum of the app. I could picture him perfectly, sitting up in the dark, phone in hand, completely immersed in the illusion I built for him. Leo, he whispered, his voice tight with a fear so profound it sounded like he was being strangled. It's here. The thing from the mill is in my apartment. Before I could answer, a different sound came through the phone speaker, cutting through the static I had created. It was a voice, but it wasn't the garbled output from my audio engine. This was clear, slow, and raspy, like something was dragging the sound out of a long dead throat. It said his name. Mark. The call dropped. In the silence that followed, I felt a cold dread wash over me. A programmer's dread. The kind you get when your code does something it wasn't designed to do. Something impossible. I had created a filter to fake the paranormal, and something from the other side had just used it to speak. My first reaction was purely technical. My mind raced through the possibilities, desperately trying to find a logical explanation. Did the audio buffer pull a cached soundbite from another app? Was there a memory leak causing it to access and distort a random audio file on his phone? Could it be a prank? Was Mark playing a soundboard to mess with me? That last one felt the most likely. It had to be. He was just getting me back for all the times I'd been a cynical butt about his beliefs. I texted him. Very funny. You got me. No reply. The little text bubble with the 3 dots didn't even appear. I texted again. Seriously, call me back. That was a good one. The empty space below my message was deafening. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. That's when the programmer's dread was replaced by a more primal, human fear. The kind that starts as a cold knot in your stomach and quickly spreads, leaving ice in its wake. I grabbed my keys and was out the door in 30 seconds. The drive to Mark's apartment complex usually took 15 minutes. I think I made it in 8. Every red light was an accusation. Every empty street corner felt like a judgment. The streetlights smeared past my windshield like watercolor streaks. My mind was a frantic battleground between logic and terror. Logic insisted it was a prank. An elaborate, cruel joke. But terror whispered about the sound of that voice. The way it had stretched his name out like it was tasting it. It wasn't a soundbite. It sounded ancient. I pulled into the parking lot of his building, killing the engine. The silence was heavy. His apartment was on the third floor, corner unit. The lights were off. Of course they were off. It was almost 2:30 in the morning. Still, it felt wrong, like the darkness in those windows was deeper than it should be. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stood outside his door, number 314, and listened. Nothing. I knocked, first gently, then harder. "Mark!" "It's me, Leo." "Open up." Silence. "Come on, man, this isn't funny anymore." The knot in my stomach tightened. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I always carried a small lockpick set on my keychain, a holdover from my teenage years of thinking I was a cool hacker. It felt absurd to be using it now. My hands were shaking so badly it took me almost a minute, the clicks and scrapes of the metal amplified in the silent hallway. I kept expecting to hear him on the other side, laughing at me. The lock finally clicked, loud as a gunshot. I pushed the door open. "Mark?" The apartment was still and dark. The air was cold and stale. I could see the familiar shapes of his lumpy couch, his cluttered coffee table, the towering shelves of books and graphic novels. On the coffee table was a plate with a half-eaten sandwich. Everything was in its place, but it felt like a museum exhibit. A diorama of a life that had suddenly stopped. "Mark, are you in your room?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak. I moved through the living room, my feet silent on the carpet. The door to his bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and that's when I found him. He was lying on his back in bed, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling with an expression of profound, frozen shock. His phone was on the floor beside the bed, face up. The screen was still on, lit by the eerie glow of my app's interface. I think I stopped breathing. For a moment, the world dissolved into a silent, slow-motion vignette. I saw the rumpled sheets, the way his hand was curled on the floor just inches from the phone, the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in my own hands. Then my lungs remembered their job and I sucked in a ragged breath. I stumbled forward, my knees hitting the floor beside his bed. "Mark," I whispered, touching his arm. He was cold. Not just cool, but a deep, penetrating cold that felt wrong. Unnatural. My gaze fell to the phone. Aura's interface was running, the familiar swirling blue and purple background pulsing gently. But in the center of the screen, where the spectral shapes were supposed to appear, was an image. It wasn't one of my fake, smoky wisps. This was sharp, detailed, and utterly terrifying. It was a face. Gaunt and narrow, with deep-set, empty sockets where eyes should have been. The skin was tight over the cheekbones, like dried parchment. The mouth was a thin, lipless slash, twisted into a silent snarl of utter malice. It was rendered in perfect, high-definition clarity against the backdrop of Mark's own bedroom ceiling, as if the app was looking back at him from the other side. It was a predator's face, and it was looking right at the camera. At me. I scrambled back, knocking over a glass of water on his nightstand. The sound shattered the silence, and reality came crashing back in. I fumbled for my own phone, my fingers thick and clumsy, and dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm, professional voice was an anchor in a swirling sea of horror. I choked out Mark's address, babbling something about my friend not breathing. The paramedics arrived first, then the police. 2 officers, a man and a woman, separated me from the paramedics and started asking questions. I told them the truth, or a version of it. I was his friend. He called me, sounded strange. I came over to check on him. I found him like this. The male officer, whose name was Miller, picked up Mark's phone. He looked at the screen, his brow furrowed. "What is this?" he asked, showing it to me. The face was still there, frozen on the screen. "It's an app," I said, my voice hoarse. "A game. Ghost hunting thing. He was testing it for me." Miller grunted, a sound of mild disapproval. He showed it to his partner. She squinted at it. "Creepy," she said, and handed it back. He tapped the screen, but the image was frozen. He had to hard reboot the phone to get it to turn off. When it came back on, the image was gone. Just a normal lock screen with a picture of a nebula. They saw a creepy picture from a game. I saw a photograph of a murderer. The official cause of death came the next day. A massive, spontaneous stroke. Sudden adult death syndrome. They said the look on his face was common in such cases, the result of the brain's final, catastrophic misfire. The call to his parents was the hardest thing I've ever done. I listened to his mother's sobs, telling her what the doctors had said, the lies feeling like poison on my tongue. How do you tell a mother that her son is dead because you accidentally coded a doorway to hell? I went home from the police station and locked the door. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat on my couch in the dark, the silence of my own apartment feeling loud and threatening. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the building settling, every distant siren was a potential threat. My carefully constructed world, built on logic and code, had been shattered. I had opened a door, and I had no idea how to close it. The first week was a haze of grief and guilt. I didn't touch my computers. The thought of looking at Aura's code made me physically ill. I was done. The project was over. I wanted to believe that if I just walked away, it would all stop. But then the subtle things started happening. It began subtly. I'd find the pantry door, the one I'd explicitly checked before leaving, nudged open by an inch, its shadow stretching too long across the linoleum. My keys, meticulously hung on the hook by the door, would mysteriously reappear on the coffee table, resting precisely where I'd left them only moments before, yet inexplicably moved. I blamed it on grief, on exhaustion. My mind was playing tricks on me, I told myself. Then came the cold spots. One evening, an intense, localized chill descended, sharp as a winter breath. It wasn't just a temperature drop. The air itself felt heavy, thick with a metallic tang, and my breath plumed visibly before my face. I gasped, goosebumps erupting across my skin. It felt like standing in front of an open freezer door. I got up, but the frigid pocket followed, clinging to me like a shroud. I walked into the kitchen, and the patch of freezing air moved with me, a pocket of winter in my heated apartment. I even grabbed a digital thermometer. The air in the kitchen was 72 degrees. The air in the cold spot was 45. Then, as abruptly as it arrived, the air warmed, leaving only the ghost of an icicle down my spine. The shadows were harder to explain. From the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement, a tall, dark shape would dart past the doorway to the hall. My head would snap around, but there was always nothing there. It left behind only a chilling residue, a sense of something having been there, something that vanished the moment I tried to focus. The breaking point came about 3 weeks after Mark's death. I was in the shower, the one place I felt I could let my guard down. The hot water and steam were a temporary shield against the creeping dread. I was rinsing the shampoo from my hair when I heard it. "You whisper." It was faint, almost lost in the hiss of the water, but it was unmistakable. It was that same dry, scraping voice from the phone call. And it said my name. Leo. I froze, shampoo suds dripping into my eyes. The water suddenly felt icy cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. I shut off the faucet, plunging the bathroom into a near-silent state, the only sound the frantic thumping in my chest and the slow drip-drip-drip from the showerhead. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice a pathetic croak. Silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, naked and vulnerable, straining my ears. Nothing. Had I imagined it? Was I finally losing my mind? No, I knew what I had heard. It was in my apartment. It had followed me from Mark's. Or worse, it hadn't followed me. It had just changed its focus. The app was the window. Mark had looked through it, and it had taken him. Now it was my turn. I was the one who had built the window. I stumbled out of the shower, grabbing a towel. My mind was racing. I couldn't live like this, haunted by shadows and whispers, waiting for the final, terrifying confrontation. I had to know. I had to see it. I had to understand what I was up against. There was only one way to do that. My hands were shaking as I walked to my desk and picked up my phone. I hadn't looked at the app since that night. My thumb hovered over the icon for Aura, a stylized, swirling letter A. Part of me was screaming not to do it, to just run, to leave everything behind. But another, more desperate part needed to see. I had to turn the lie I had created into a tool for truth. I tapped the icon. The app loaded, the familiar purple and blue interface filling the screen. It looked so innocent, so harmless. I took a deep breath and stood up, holding the phone like a shield. I activated the main filter. I panned the phone across my living room. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The screen just showed my apartment, tinted with the app's signature ethereal glow. Then, the algorithm started doing its job. A few fake wisps of smoke appeared near a bookshelf, faded, and then disappeared. I almost let out a sigh of relief. It was just a stupid app. It was all in my head. Then I pointed the phone towards the darkest corner of the room, near the hallway entrance where I'd seen the shadows move. The phone screen flickered violently. The gentle, swirling colors of the interface glitched, dissolving into a mess of green and black pixels for a second, like the app was struggling to process what it was seeing. My phone grew hot in my hand. Then the image resolved. It wasn't a wisp. It wasn't a smoky, vague shape. Standing in the corner of my room was a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin, a stark, black silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it, making the shadows in the corner look pale by comparison. It was featureless, a void in the shape of a man, but it had presence. It had weight. As I watched, frozen in place, it slowly turned its head to look at me. There was no face, no eyes, but I felt its gaze lock onto me through the phone. A wave of pure, undiluted malevolence washed over me, a psychic pressure that made my teeth ache and my vision swim. Then, the audio feed crackled to life. It wasn't the pre-programmed static. It was a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the phone, a sound of pure hate. I had built a window. And now, the thing on the other side was looking back. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The sound was trapped in my throat, choked off by a terror so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I lowered the phone, my arm trembling uncontrollably. I looked at the corner with my own eyes. Nothing. Just shadows. But I knew it was there. I could feel it. The air was thick with its presence, heavy and cold. I raised the phone again. The black figure was still there, motionless, watching me. I took a stumbling step back, and its head tilted, a gesture of cold curiosity. The low growl from the phone speaker deepened, and underneath it, a voice began to coalesce from the static. Leo, the architect. The voice was the same dry rasp I'd heard before, but clearer now, stronger. It was using my app as a megaphone, focusing its energy through the very code I had written. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the screen showing the ceiling. I scrambled away, crab-walking backward until my back hit the opposite wall, my eyes locked on the empty corner. I could hear the voice still coming from the phone speaker, a distorted, mocking whisper. "Open the door." I spent the rest of the night huddled on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, with every light in the apartment blazing. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that featureless black silhouette, that void in the shape of a man. The entity, my entity, was here. It was real, and it knew my name. The next day, I became an investigator in my own horror story. Fueled by a desperate, terrified energy, I turned to the only thing I knew: the code. If I had created the problem, then somewhere in the millions of lines of code, there had to be a solution. There had to be an off switch. I sat at my computer, forcing myself to open the Aura project files. Looking at the familiar interface of my coding environment felt profane. This workspace, which had once been my sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. I pulled up the core files for the pareidolia filter and the audio engine. I had been so proud of its design. It was supposed to work by taking random input and forcing a pattern onto it. But what if it wasn't forcing a pattern? What if it was detecting one? What if the random energy fluctuations it was reading weren't random at all? I dove into the audio processing module first, since that was the source of the voice. I had built a sophisticated noise generator that was seeded by the microphone's raw input. It was meant to capture ambient sound, strip out recognizable frequencies, and use the remaining junk data to create its EVP effect. My terrifying hypothesis was that the entity was somehow embedding its voice into that junk data. For hours, I analyzed the code, running simulations, checking data flows. And then I found it. A single, elegant, and catastrophic flaw. In my attempt to create a more natural-sounding static, I had created a recursive feedback loop. The app wasn't just listening to ambient noise. It was listening to the static it was producing, processing it, and then feeding it back into the system. It was a closed loop, designed to refine the randomness. Instead, it had turned my app into a kind of sonic focusing lens. It was amplifying a frequency I couldn't hear, a carrier wave in the noise, making it stronger and stronger until it became a bridge. The entity wasn't just speaking into the microphone. It was using the feedback loop to power its own manifestation, to pull itself into our world. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't built a fake ghost detector. I had built a real ghost amplifier. A sudden, sharp crack from the kitchen made me jump out of my chair. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept out of my office, my every nerve screaming. On the kitchen floor, in 1,000 pieces, was a ceramic mug that had been sitting on the counter a good 2 feet from the edge. "Clever boy," the voice whispered. This time, it wasn't from the phone. It was in the room with me, a faint, sibilant hiss that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You understand the logic, Leo. Now feel the consequence." I ran back to my desk, my hands shaking. The haunting was escalating. The subtle events were giving way to overt, physical displays. It was getting stronger. And my app was its battery pack. Over the next few days, my life became a living hell. The entity grew bolder. It was a constant, oppressive presence. I would be working, and a book would fly off a shelf behind me. The lights would flicker and die, plunging me into darkness, only to flare back on moments later. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were taunts. I used the app sparingly, only when I absolutely had to know where it was. Each time, the image of the black silhouette became slightly more defined. I started to see hints of a shape within the void, something emaciated and twisted. The growls and whispers from the audio feed grew in clarity. "Mark, screamed for you," it hissed at me one night, the voice coming from my phone speaker as I watched the silhouette stand motionless by my bedroom door. "He knew you left him." "Shut up," I whispered back to the empty room, tears of rage and terror streaming down my face. You built the door, it continued, its voice a venomous caress. Now you must pay the toll. All who build the doors must pay. It was feeding on me, on my fear, my guilt, my focus. The more I interacted with it, the more I researched the code, the more I thought about it, the stronger it became. My attempt to understand my prison was only reinforcing the bars. I tried to find answers outside of my own code. I spent sleepless nights trawling the darkest corners of the internet, paranormal forums, occult wikis, digitized versions of crumbling old grimoires. I learned about resonant frequencies, about entities drawn to focused human will, about the idea of digital sigils. The consensus, from madmen and scholars alike, was terrifyingly consistent. To create a connection, you need a symbol and you need energy. I had created a digital symbol, the app itself, and a machine that generated its own energy. I had, in my blind arrogance, stumbled upon the recipe for summoning a demon and had written it in Python. I even found a ghost of a story on an obscure developer forum from 6 years prior. A user with a now deleted account posted a frantic message about an unintended audio feedback phenomenon in an R project he was working on. He described hearing voices in the static, voices that knew his name. The few replies dismissed him as a crank or a troll. 3 days after his initial post, his account went silent. He never logged in again. Reading it felt like finding my own tombstone, already carved. The entity started using Mark against me. One afternoon, I heard the faint sound of music coming from my living room. It was a deep cut from an obscure indie band that Mark and I had seen live years ago. Our song, we used to joke. It was coming from my speakers, which were unplugged. The taunts became more specific, laced with details of my past that only Mark could have known. It was proof that it hadn't just killed him. It had violated him, perhaps even absorbed fragments of his being. It had his memories. The breaking point, the moment I knew I had to act, came on a Tuesday night. I had been awake for nearly 48 hours, staring at code, trying to find a way to reverse the feedback loop. I must have drifted off at my desk. I was jolted awake by the sound of my bedroom door slamming shut with enough force to shake the wall. I grabbed my phone and activated Aura. I pointed it down the hall. The black figure wasn't standing in the corner anymore. It was moving. It was slowly, deliberately gliding down the hallway directly towards my office. And it wasn't just a silhouette. The filter was now resolving a horrifying form within the blackness. Long, spindly limbs that moved with a jerky, unnatural gait. A skeletal frame draped in what looked like rags of shadow. And the face from Mark's phone, was now visible, a snarling mask of ancient evil. The audio wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a clear, cold, conversational voice. "Time is up, Leo. I'm tired of the waiting room." I could hear it with my own ears now, a faint echo of the voice from the phone. The barrier was breaking down. Soon I wouldn't need the app to see it or hear it. It was manifesting. That was it. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't contain it. My only option was to destroy the connection, to burn the bridge. The entity was at the doorway to my office now. Through the phone, it was a towering, horrifying monster. With my own eyes, it was a shimmering distortion in the air, a place where the light seemed to bend and warp around a point of absolute cold. A glass on my desk rattled, then slid to the edge and shattered on the floor. My mind raced, formulating a desperate plan. The code, the app, the servers, they were the anchor. The digital footprint was the doorway. I had to erase every last trace of it. I sat down at my keyboard, my fingers flying. The entity was in the room with me now. The cold was intense, biting. My breath plumed in front of my face. Through the phone, which I had propped up on the desk, I could see it looming over me, its featureless face inches from mine. "You built this cage, architect. You are bound to it. It hissed, the sound both in my ears and in my head. A wave of pressure slammed into me. The air grew thick, like I was moving through water. My vision swam. The entity on the screen let out a shriek, a sound of digital feedback and tearing metal. I started with a remote repository, the master source of the code stored in the cloud. I opened my terminal, fingers flying, and typed git push delete origin master. The command to erase the primary branch executed. A wave of pressure slammed into me. The air grew thick, like I was moving through water. My vision swam. The entity on the screen let out a shriek, a sound of digital feedback and tearing metal. Next, the backups. I had them stored on a separate cloud server. I logged in, my fingers fumbling on the keys. The lights in my office flickered violently. My monitor buzzed, the text blurring. The door. The entity roared, the voice seeming to shake the very foundations of the building. I felt an icy, crushing grip on my shoulder. It was real. Not just a feeling of cold, but the distinct, sharp pressure of phantom fingers digging into my muscle. I cried out in pain, arching my back, but I didn't stop typing. I navigated to the directory and initiated the delete command. rmrf/aura_backups. The grip vanished, but the cold intensified. The monitor went black. No, I didn't panic. I knew the keyboard shortcuts by heart. I kept typing blind, confirming the deletion. I hit enter. The monitor flickered back on, showing a confirmation message. The backup files were gone. Only my local files remained. 2 drives. A primary solid-state drive and a secondary hard drive for storage. I opened the File Explorer. The entity was raging now. The distortion in the air was churning, violent. The papers on my desk swirled into the air as if caught in a whirlwind. A framed picture of me and Mark flew off the wall and shattered against the door. You cannot close what you have opened. I selected the Aura project folder on my main drive. My hand hovered over the delete key. I could feel its focus on me, a pressure on my mind that was trying to break my will. I saw an image of Mark's face in my mind, his eyes wide with terror. I slammed the delete key. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these files? Yes! A piercing shriek filled the room, a sound of pure agony that was both physical and psychic. It threw me back from my desk, my chair skidding across the floor. On my phone, the entity's form was dissolving, unraveling like a corrupted video file, its pixels shredding into nothingness. I crawled back to the desk, ignoring the pain in my head. 1 drive left. The secondary storage. I selected the final directory. My final sin. Just as my finger touched the key, I felt it. Icy, unseen hands closing around my throat. The pressure was immense, cutting off my air. My lungs burned. Black spots danced in my vision. This was it. This was how it ended. Just like Mark. With the last of my strength, my vision tunneling to a single point, I lunged forward and hit the enter key with the palm of my hand. The pressure vanished. The screaming stopped. The whirlwind in the room died. The distortion in the air dissipated. The figure on my phone screen dissolved into a final shower of static, and then the app crashed, returning the screen to my normal home page. Everything was silent. Utterly, completely silent. I lay on the floor, gasping for air, my throat raw. The cold in the room slowly receded, replaced by the normal, ambient temperature. I sat up, my body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. It was over. I had done it. I had closed the door. For a long time, I just sat there on the floor of my ruined office, surrounded by broken glass and scattered papers, and I cried. I cried for Mark. I cried out of sheer, gut-wrenching terror. And I cried with a sliver of relief, so profound it was painful. Eventually, I got up. I packed a bag. I walked out of my apartment without looking back. The next day, I went to my garage, took the hard drives from my computer, and drilled holes through them until they were nothing but shattered platters and ruined electronics. I drove for 2 days, putting as much distance between me and that place as I could. Which brings me to now. 3 months later. I live in a small, anonymous apartment in a city where no one knows my name. The whispers all are gone. The shadows are gone. The cold spots are gone. The entity I gave form to is gone. Its anchor to this world destroyed. But I am not free. I have a new fear now. A quieter, more insidious one. Before, when the haunting was at its peak, I had the app. I had my terrible lens. I could turn it on and see my tormentor. I knew where it was. I could see the monster in the corner, the demon in the hallway. I could face my enemy. Now, I am blind. I sit in the dark of my new apartment, and the silence is the loudest thing I've ever heard. Every creak of the floorboards in the apartment above, every gust of wind against the window pane, every unfamiliar groan of a new building settling sends a jolt of pure ice through my veins. Last week, a floorboard in my own hallway creaked when I was sitting perfectly still in the living room. I spent the next 6 hours sitting on a kitchen stool with my back against the wall, watching the hallway until the sun came up. It was probably just the building's old wood contracting. Probably. I destroyed the door I built. I have to believe that. But what if it didn't need the door anymore? What if all my app did was teach it how to notice us? What if it's just weaker now, biding its time? I have no way of knowing. I have no way of checking. I have removed my only sense that could perceive the world I now know for a fact is real. The terror of seeing the monster is nothing compared to the terror of knowing it's there and not being able to see it at all. It could be standing in the corner of this room right now, watching me type these words, a silent, gaunt spectator to my confession. And it could be smiling, remembering the taste of my friend's fear. I don't know. And I will never know again. That is my true haunting. So please, if you are a programmer, a creator, a dreamer, and you have an idea like the one I had, leave it alone. Don't build the door. Don't even draw the blueprints. Some things in the dark are meant to stay there, unseen. Because once you see them, they see you too. And even if you manage to close your eyes, you'll never be able to forget that they're still there, watching. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel Mark Stories.